Nancy Guthrie investigation, day 40. The big question today is, could the offender strike again? Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Police Off the Cuff. Tonight, we're discussing day 40 of the Nancy Guthrie kidnapping investigation. And the reality is this case has now entered a phase that every investigator dreads. Time has passed by without an arrest. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos has now publicly raised a troubling possibility. He's warned that the person responsible for Nancy Guthrie's disappearance may still be out there and could potentially strike again. Oh, really? You think he's really still out there? You don't have him in custody. Of course he's out there. That statement is not made lightly by law enforcement. And tonight, we're going to break down what warning means, what evidence investigators actually have, and why this case has proven so difficult to solve. But a quick reminder, if you're looking for real crime, not YouTube theories, this channel's different. I'm a retired NYPD sergeant, and on Police Off the Cuff, we analyze cases the way cops and prosecutors do. What matters, what doesn't, and what the internet gets wrong. If that's the perspective you want, subscribe now, because this isn't entertainment, it's experience. And I just give a quick reminder, folks, that this show is sponsored by FanDuel on the Believe Network. So, folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your thoughts, hold on to your service dog. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the Police Off the Cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
Joining me tonight is retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney at law. He's got a lot of credentials on that shingle, right? Professor Mike Geary, welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, Bill. Good evening. Good to see you. Thank you.
Mike, you got to move your green screen over a little bit because there's a gap in the middle. Look at that. I'm sorry I had to tell you live, but all right, thanks, Mike. So, Mike, I cannot believe what some of the things I'm hearing. First of all, we've discussed Sheriff Nanos before, and I can't believe he's commenting on the fact that he said on another show that we believe we know the motive, but then when questioned on it, he wouldn't provide what the detectives think is the motive in this case. And then part two of that is that the perpetrator's still out there. You think he is? Well, you haven't put him in handcuffs. Of course he's still out there. And making it a little more worrisome for the people that live in Tucson, Arizona, in that very community. Could he strike again? Well, as you know, Mike, every criminal could strike again. And the only thing that makes it certain that they won't is if law enforcement puts them in handcuffs and puts them away, But so for him to say that, could he strike again? And I got some feelings upon that. But before I voice mine, I want to ask you, Mike, could he strike again?
Yeah. I mean, how many people have you arrested, Bill, in your career, and Phil and I, and they've had a clean record up until the moment that you arrested them? Very few people commit crimes. Criminal-minded people commit crimes all the time. That's what they do. You go to work in a dentist office, you go to work as a firefighter, you go to work as a doctor, a lawyer, whatever you do for a living, electrician. This is what these people do. They go to work and they commit crimes. Whatever they do, if they're robbers, they're burglars, fraudsters, whatever they do, that's what they do. Of course, these people could strike again. And that doesn't take anybody with much high IQ to figure that one out. Sometimes he's Captain Obvious, and sometimes you just shake your head. But when he mentioned about the motive, do not bring up a subject that you cannot discuss, because the moment you bring up motive, then everybody's going to jump all over it. Do not bring that up until you can actually discuss it intelligently. Why he would do that, I don't know. He's not good with a microphone and a camera. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely not. But you know something, Mike? We've said it so many times. There's been so many talking heads since the beginning. This, day 40. Every expert from across this great nation that has a law enforcement credentials, and some with really questionable credentials. They put them up there like people that did 2 years in the FBI and 3 years in the CIA. All of a sudden, they're a crime expert. But in this case, right? It appears, and we said from the very beginning, and look, we're guessing too, in a way, right? That Nancy Guthrie was targeted, was absolutely targeted. This was not some guy driving by, saw her driveway and said, "Oh, I bet you an 84-year-old woman lives there. Let me go kidnap her," right? So she was absolutely targeted. There's other signs that she was targeted, but yet we were all expecting at this point, 40 days in, that someone would be in handcuffs in this situation. I'm going to play this from the Today Show. We'll get to hear from Sheriff Nanos.
As the search for answers into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance continues, over the last week, so many people still showing up and showing their support for Savannah.
I've watched the Today Show for many years, and you become family.
We're not going to stop praying until we get an answer, and some closure.
Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos telling us they're still working to identify that masked man at Nancy's home.
Do you think that this suspect could strike again, whoever did this?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, criminal minds are criminal minds.
Well,
Mike, how would you have stopped that from getting out there? One way to stop that from getting out there is not to appear on the damn Today Show.
That's right.
Right? You don't know what the interviewer is going to ask you, right? She's not going to give you a list of questions. So the smart thing to do as a police commander is to stay the hell off the air. As you said before the show, he never met a camera he didn't like.
Right.
But guess what, dude? You're not good. You're not good as a messenger. You're not good as a police commander. You're not good as a guy running the investigation. So stay off the damn news.
If you want to do a weekly, have someone, not him, have someone from his office, hire somebody who's good in front of a mic, who's really good with communication. Put them out there once a month, once a week, 20 minutes, and field those questions so that he doesn't have to. They're not going into his office. That person speaking at a podium, they give out whatever message they want. They understand what kind of questions they're going to receive, and they're prepared for an answer. And then that's it. You just do it and get it over with. For him to go out there and appear in front of a camera, it just convinces me more and more. And I said it before, when you get to this level, he's an elected official. He's a politician. He's like every other politician at this point, looking for a camera and getting out a message. And I'm not taking anything away from his law enforcement skills as a detective or a police officer or whatever, but this he is not good at, not at all.
To say it lightly, let me go back to the Today Show.
He didn't disclose it. The sheriff says investigators do have a theory for a motive.
We believe we know why he did this, and we believe that it was targeted, but we're not 100% sure of that. And so it'd be silly to tell people, yeah, don't worry about it. You're not his target.
But you just did tell them that. You just did. So if you think it would be silly to say, then don't say it, because it is silly. You're right. You're silly. So you just admitted to being a silly guy.
No, you could be.
He says investigators are still actively working their leads, including that unknown DNA.
Is there still hope that this mixed DNA will be able to be identified?
Absolutely. That's going to get us to somebody, we hope.
Nanos also confirmed investigators have been looking into a potential internet issue or other electrical disruption the night of the abduction.
There was a timeline when things went offline. So we're looking into that. Why did that occur? We check with our power companies. We check with others in the neighborhood.
And that's beyond just the fact that the suspect took the camera off.
Correct.
As the investigation goes on, an incredible outpouring of love for the Guthrie family.
It says Nancy. All of us are praying for you to come home now.
Tucson artist Donna Prius, who goes by the name Pinky, has been leaving these canvas paintings outside Nancy's home.
Something they can save, something that they read, and I think they'll feel it in their heart. I know Savannah will.
Now, in addition to the sheriff confirming authorities are looking into whether there was that internet or potential electrical issue the night of Nancy's abduction, he said they don't believe that the damaged utility box near Nancy's home is connected. As for what he told us about knowing why the suspect did this, he says they've had a theory from day one. We did press him, but he just would not say what that is. The FBI, for their part, has not commented on any motive.
So why would you, if you don't know specifically what the motive is, why would you say anything about that? I think that's ill-advised. I'll put it that way, to talk about the motive. And as we know, Mike, and you know, especially since you're an attorney, motive is not part of the crime.
No, it's not.
I just want to address some folks. Our chat is always robust, and we get some smart people there. And Carly Beans, I'm going to read your comment. At Carly Beans 22, I'm starting to wonder if there's a sexual motive behind this kidnapping. Carly, that I wouldn't dismiss that. That has been suggested. Joseph Scott Morgan suggested that this potentially could be elder abuse. And he also dismissed the fact that this was a kidnapping. And I'll tell you how he dismissed it. He dismissed it by saying, do you know how many cases of people taken for ransom I've had in my entire career? And everyone's waiting for this answer. And how many? 0, he said. When he said that, I was like, wow, there's a guy, he works on murders. He's a forensic expert, right? And he said 0. So, for the sheriff to say that we know the motive, so did about 100 other talking heads throughout this case that have been on every news channel on this earth. And they all specifically said, oh, this is a kidnapping. According to Matt Murphy, the famous Orange County prosecutor from California, he said, and this is the first time I've heard this, and it was from yesterday, an interview on Megyn Kelly with the attorney Geragos. He said every single one of those ransom notes were all false. They were all phony. Every single one. It was the first time I heard that, Mike. So quite interesting. What are your thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, we did have our concerns after the first one. We're like, okay, maybe this is a new kind of operator, kidnapper who's going to go and talk about Bitcoin, and then the second one was through Harvey Levin in TMZ, and we're sitting like, okay, this is kind of going off the rails. I think Phil was the first one of us to say, you know what? No, this doesn't sound right whatsoever. Yeah, this was not a kidnapping. And I agree with the viewer that, and Joseph Scott Morgan, there are people who like to abuse children. They like to abuse the elderly. It's all about power and over somebody, and somebody who's weak and is frail and can't take care of themselves. This is absolutely one of the working theories probably in the case is that it was a case of elder abuse. And I'm hoping that in Pima County in Arizona, the state police and the Pima County Sheriff's Office are going through all their files for anyone in the past, say, decade that has been arrested for endangering the welfare of an elderly person, because these people, this is what they do. This is what they're attracted to. So that is a very good observation. This may be exactly elder abuse.
100%. Karen Alberini, 714. I have only 3 theories: grudge, hate crime, botched kidnapping. Karen, you could be right. So many people have weighed in on this, that I don't discount anyone's theory. I don't poo-poo anyone saying, oh, you're wrong. Right. From at KMTX78, thank you so much. Gifted 5 police off-the-cuff memberships to 5 lucky people that are in the chat. Thank you so much at KMTX78. Simi Sharp, always, and thank you for your support. Simi Sharp is a great moderator, always available, and she's always says, hold on to your bass, since she's a bass player. She wants everyone to know that she's a mean bass player, right? So, yeah, I mean, the premise of this show, is the perpetrator still out there? Yeah, obviously he's still out there. The big question that all of us want to know is, who is the perpetrator? Not whether he's still out there. Who is he? And where is he? And do you have the evidence to connect the perpetrator to this crime? And apparently not, or someone else would be in handcuffs right now, right? And all of the someone else, I want to read the comment at -6339. Similar to Nancy Woodrum case in California, which was sexual. She was in her 60s. You know something, at -6339, I'm not discounting that at all. That very well could be the motive. It very well could be the reason behind this. I was reluctant just to say that, because I don't want to just say it, because it's a nasty thought to think that could have happened to poor 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. But the reality of crime is that you're dealing with bad people, and this absolutely could have happened. At KMTX78, I still don't understand a sketch in color, sketch like you have suggested in prior shows. Well, a sketch is usually just in black and white, but since so much of this here, this is the black and white sketch, and also this sketch that you see up on the screen right now is it's not done by the FBI or Pima County. It was done by a private citizen. So it was an unsolicited sketch. It's a sketch that law enforcement can't put their stamp of approval on. And I say this every show, and Mike backs me up.
Yeah.
Why hasn't law enforcement put out their own sketch? Pima County, I'm sure they have sketch artists. The FBI, we know they have sketch artists. And then part two of that, why can't the sketch be in color? Maybe that would draw more witnesses that might say, oh, that's so-and-so. Mike, your thoughts with that?
Sure. That sketch that you put up there, we've used that many times in the show, and that was done by a retired professional, I think it was Houston, sketch artist with like 30 or 40 years. So they know what they're talking about. And you could use these stills with AI, and you could just remove stuff off the face and get the bone structure, because that mask is tight enough that person has, and you can see enough of it around their mouth, their lip, their eyes, their eyebrows, that you could put together a fairly decent sketch. It doesn't have to look like a photograph at the end of the day, but if it reminds somebody that may look like someone, then combined with the video, if that was in color, I think that would be fantastic, because everybody is comfortable in certain clothing that may be a very distinctive looking jacket, maybe whatever color it is. And when you see things in color, you see it in much better image. And it's how we see in color. We don't see in black and white. It makes it much more difficult to identify somebody in black and white than color, because color brings all of the differences in skin color and clothing and whatever, all of your accoutrements. People might say, I know those pair. That guy, someone who kind of looks like that, that's his favorite jacket, or that jacket and that pants. I've seen that on somebody before. All you have to do is get one person to think I know that person. So you have the public going out there and actually doing what they can do best, is think about who that may be. And if you just get one good tip, that's it. But why wouldn't you put that out there in color? Why wouldn't you get your own FBI sketch artist? That boggles our mind. Maybe there's a reason and that we don't understand, but I'd like to hear that reason.
Absolutely. At Benny Dovo 7148 from the chat, in my opinion, many news reporters and talk show hosts get these real psychopaths who obsess over them for years, and when they realize they have no chance, and try and torture a family member instead. At Benny Dover 7148, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
We don't know enough of the inside of this case. I mean, I'm glad to hear that Pima County has a theory on the motive of this, and that the Sheriff Nanos didn't let that theory out. Because that shows they have some sort of direction. If they had no theory, I'd say, wow, these guys are just dribbling on themselves 40 days after the occurrence. At Tiny Face McGee 9211, question, can they use just the video convict someone? It's not very clear. What other evidence do they have? Tiny Face McGee, no, it would be the video would just part of the evidence they would use. No, it could not be the sole piece of evidence that they would have to convict someone. At Kiana, Lamag, pictures say a lot. Well, that's the old expression. A picture is worth 1,000 words. That's absolutely 100% true. Brian Entin was on with this very same topic. I'm going to play a little of his News Nation video in regards to this topic, in regards to Sheriff Nanos.
You know, the sheriff did a new interview today and said, he was asked specifically, do you think that this suspect could strike again? And he responded, absolutely, which is not something that I was expecting him to say. We're outside his office right now here in Pima County. And he did follow up and say, we still believe that it was targeted, but we can't say that 100%. So that was also just kind of troubling to hear him say. I mean, he literally said absolutely when he was asked if the suspect could strike again.
Okay, so two parts about that. One, it seems to be that he's just hedging his bets, right? He's saying not that he has new evidence to suggest this person's on a spree and is going to attack somebody else, but we just can't definitively say if it was targeted. But Brian, look, I have to ask you this: if we're talking about Kohberger following your reporting before he was caught, and maybe have to assume that's maybe why he was following you, for maybe to get ahead of investigators. Do you think the person or persons who allegedly kidnapped Nancy may be following your reporting? There's no reporter I know that has been more on this than you. And now if you're hearing this from the sheriff that, this person could still be a danger, I'm throwing it to you on this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess whoever did this probably following a lot of reporting, including mine. Again, I'm kind of the one who's been on it every single day. Now it's day 40, so I would imagine so. I mean, there are obviously certain things that we don't always report, things that we find out or we hear about. You kind of have to keep, in perspective here that this person is still on the run. There are parts of this investigation that have to remain secret for obvious reasons. But it's a strange sort of component of this whole thing to think about. I mean, you've been doing crime reporting for probably almost or as long as I have. I mean, I think it's just a reality that we have to deal with. I mean, these people are probably watching us, and it was, like I said, I wasn't totally surprised when I found out that Kohberger was, but to see the actual screen grabs of the videos was a little like, oh my gosh.
Let me tell you something. If he went to trial, you could have been a piece of the evidence because it would have shown consciousness of guilt. Why is he looking so much into reporting about?
They're talking about that apparently in another case that we covered. Brian Kohberger used Brian Entin to follow the very case he was being charged with. Mike, must be your phone.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that.
Quadruple homicide, right? I mean, that would have been, maybe you might have been a part of that, a piece of that evidence, just to let you know. Speaking of the Guthrie case, just for a second, what is the latest on the ground there? Have you been able to look at a little bit more about the search warrants at all? What can you tell us?
Yeah, we've been trying to get the search warrants because let's not forget about those two big events. I mean, right on your show, we were there that one night, the two big raids. I mean, there was the one in Rio Rico near Mexico, and then there was the one 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's house, and there were search warrants. Unfortunately, we still haven't been able to get our hands on them. They are sealed from what we can tell. This is all still active. They haven't officially said like anybody's been cleared at this point except for the Guthrie family, but we've been trying to get them because again, I think it would just be so interesting to find out what led them to those two people and those addresses, yet they still haven't made any arrests. Was it cell phone data? What have they been looking into behind the scenes? But we haven't been able to get them yet, Jesse.
I heard there's been talk about this video of Nancy in her bedroom. What can you tell us more about that?
There was a video of on the Today Show
right,
of Nancy Guthrie in her bedroom. And bad idea, right? Because now that little piece of information for the perpetrators, they know where her bedroom is, doors, windows, where
right.
everything is, where she sleeps, what part of the house it's in. That was all on national television on a previous episode of the Today Show. So talking about a criminal reconning, I just want to mention someone from the chat said something that was a little disturbing to me. I'm going to read it. At Jag 619, Nancy's house was the target. This was a burglary gone wrong. The subject thought the house was unoccupied. You two are misleading people the same way Chris McDonough at the interview room. First of all, at Jag 619, we are not misleading anyone. I don't know what your credentials are. Mine are 27 years with the NYPD, 16 years in the Detective Bureau, 22 years as sergeant, all right? Ran hundreds of homicide investigations, close probably thousands, homicide and shooting investigations. So please don't give me that insult that we're misleading. We're not misleading anyone. We're giving this information out based on experience and knowledge. I don't know what your knowledge or experience is. Sorry, I had to put you in your place because you needed to be put in your place. There is evidence that the perpetrators in this reconned this location. He brought a home invasion kit with him in the back of his backpack, right? He covered his face. He may have even had a blocker of the Wi-Fi, something to shut off the. So when you say we're giving false information, I don't think you know what you're talking about. So there, okay, Mike.
Yeah, we've talked about the angle of it being a kidnapping and a ransom. We've talked about the burglary gone wrong. We've talked about it as a home invasion. We've talked about it as a targeted attack on Nancy Guthrie as Nancy Guthrie, not just a random target attack. We've talked about it as elder abuse. You know, we're not misleading anybody or telling people it's still, we believe something that we don't believe, or we believe something, or we're telling people we believe something that we truly don't believe. We're using our experience in the NYPD to bear on this issue and analyzing what information that has been made public. That's all. We're not telling anybody believe our theory of the case.
You know, Mike, just to use the very word, and they always say never use the same word in the definition of what the word means. Evidence is something that makes something apparent. Right. That's it, right? Something that proves something. And that's what we try to do on this show. We don't try to just jump to conclusions. When people brought up the fact that Tommaso Cioni was a person of interest early in his game, we wouldn't even say that.
No.
Because look where they're at now. Could he still be a person? Absolutely. But is there evidence they have that could point the finger at him? I say no. I say absolutely no. But when you see evidence against this perpetrator, right, and video evidence, right, and basic evidence, evidence. Do you think this guy was walking along the road and just decided to stop at this house? Or did someone drive him there? Or did he drive himself there, if you believe he acted alone? I don't believe he acted alone, right? I believe someone drove him there, because if he acted alone, did he then take Nancy Guthrie out of the house and carry her across the border? Like, so ridiculous things that people make statements like that. This guy did not act alone. She was targeted. There's tons of evidence that she was targeted. So, and just to say this was a burglary gone bad, all right, dude, give me your evidence of that, right? And you may be right. This could have been, but it was not a burglary gone bad that he just said, oh, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, let me pick that house. No, this house was specifically targeted. Nancy Guthrie was specifically targeted, and there is evidence to that. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, this wasn't random. We know that. And, you know, when on the Today Show with a video of her house and you know, Savannah's going through the house with her mom, just showing her, this is where I grew up. This is my neighborhood. I love Pima County. This is my childhood. You see it. And if you like that show, you smile through it. And you're like, oh, that's really nice. It's a nice, warm feeling to see this elderly lady that's your mom. But if you're a perp, you look at that and you see it totally different. You're looking at windows. You're looking at doors. Is there a sliding rear door? Those are not a very, you know, a good defense against a burglary. Is this one floor? Is this a one floor house? I can get in through a skylight on the roof with a 6-foot ladder. People look at things very differently with very different discerning eyes. And so therefore, the idea that, this video was put out there, that may be very significant. We don't know for sure, but we talk about the investigation. You start from the center. Who knows her? We talk about the victimology. You work your way out. And are there relatives and in-laws that may be a person of interest? Yes, until you clear them. And so everybody, and I cannot believe how many content makers out there are putting out stuff every day. Oh, the son-in-law is going to be arrested any moment now. No, stop that. They're misleading the public. We do it analytically from the point of view of what does the prosecutor need? What does a homicide detective need? What does a detective need to get this case solved?
You're right, Mike. At Carly Beans, I say it's definitely not a burglary because the perp entered expecting a confrontation. Carly, just so you know, I see where you're coming from, but a burglary, I'm just going to give you the definition of a burglary, and this is verbatim from the New York State Penal Law, and I'm sure it's the same in almost every state. A burglary is to knowingly and unlawfully enter or remain in a building with intent to commit a crime therein. That is word for word out of the New York State Penal Law. Burglary has 3 degrees. 3rd degree is the least. That was the definition of burglary, 3rd degree. To raise it to a 2nd, certain things have to be present. To raise it to a 1st, certain other things, which were present in this. This was the minute he entered this house, it was a burglary 1st degree. You know why? Because he was armed with a deadly weapon. He was armed with a firearm. So it jumped right to. So you say, and you said earlier on, Carly, that this was a home invasion. You know something? Yeah. I agree. He's armed with a gun. He is ready for bear. He is ready to get into a confrontation. And, you sort of triggered me in a way because there are politicians across this nation that have said out of their lips that burglary is a nonviolent crime. I would like to slap the shit out of those politicians for even saying that. That is outrageous. Sorry, I get very cop-like in that expression, because someone comes into your home when you're home. That is not a nonviolent crime. They intend to do whatever's necessary to take your property or to hurt you or to hurt your family. So when a politician says that, it makes my blood boil. Mike.
Yeah, I actually had that discussion that you just talked about with my students about a week ago. I talked about burglary. We were talking about burglary and trespass and the differences and the different degrees. And I said, look, if somebody's coming into your home to burglarize, they've got burglar's tools. They've got screwdrivers. They may have a paint scraper to jimmy something. I said, I saw a guy in my old precinct who got slashed in the gut with a paint scraper, and his intestines were coming out. You could do a lot of damage with a screwdriver, stabbing somebody in the gut with that. You have a pry bar. They have weapons that they're using to open up and break things. And so they are armed, whether they're armed with a knife, whether they're armed with a pry bar, a screwdriver, a firearm. In this case, this person had what looked like a firearm. They, as you said, they were prepared for bear. This person was going into that house and was ready for anything. And woe to that person who was trying to resist. He would have the ability to end their life. Burglary is not a property crime. And I always say that every year in my class, we talk about that. It is a violent crime. And I've seen burglaries where there's a dead person, burglaries where there's a raped person. It is a very violent crime.
100%. I'm going to go back to News Nation to hear the rest of their report on this.
Yeah, so this is very kind of another just sort of freaky thing. There's this Today Show video. It's from 2013, Jesse. It's another segment that Savannah did with her mom that no one had really seen until yesterday. It sort of surfaced again. But this segment was actually inside Nancy Guthrie's bedroom. So they had a live shot set up in her bedroom. Savannah was back in the studio talking to her mom in her bedroom, and she was showing Savannah and her viewers basically how to make a bed. This is how I taught Savannah how to make a bed. I make it so perfectly. And her mom came across just really sweet. I mean, it broke your heart to see the video and think about where we're at now. But it was also just strange because it was inside her bedroom. I mean, you could see the window, you could see the bed, you could see what it was like inside her bedroom. And again, knowing what we know now, that she was taken from her bedroom, it's really sad to think about.
And it could have given the person or persons who allegedly took her an idea, mapping out of what the house looked like, what that room looked like. And that's just a very, very unfortunate to think about, because it's impossible to know that you were filming what is a nice segment that potentially could have been used by someone to harm her. Brian, listen, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for.
So yeah, we're big fans of Brian Entin too. We think he does a fantastic job. He's there. When people talk about things that were done right with this case and things that were done wrong, the number one thing that we said from the very beginning is what was done from a organizational standpoint was that the messaging was and is horrible on this case. And the person to blame for that is Sheriff Nanos. He's clueless. He's clueless what to say and what not to say. And so the best thing for him to do is to say nothing. But he cannot stay off the air. He has to keep going on the air and, giving his opinion of where it's going and giving his thoughts of this is the motive. Why would you say that? So where are we at with this case then? Well, what everyone, of course, is hoping is that the DNA on that famous glove that went back, that's already been disqualified. That's never going to identify anybody. It actually did identify someone and another person, and he's been eliminated. What we said yesterday on our show when I was on with straight out of Brooklyn, retired NYPD Detective Phil Grimaldi, was investigation is a process of including and eliminating. So you include people that potentially could be a suspect, and then you eliminate people based on the fact that evidence clears them. And that is an ongoing process. So other detectives and this whole task force, they're still getting tips, right? They have to review these tips every single day and decide which ones are good and which ones are bad, right? And someone has to run this investigation. And usually it's a big boss at the top of the investigation. And it was the same way on the NYPD, except when a case was really big, the big bosses would be all over it. And as days, weeks went by, no more big bosses. They had big boss things to do, and they'd return back to their lair. And we would run it probably more competently than the big bosses. But that's the way it works. And that's the way this case works also. Let's see, at Robert Jones, are you new to the chat, Robert? I'm just going to read your comments. While the focus is on roads leaving the area, where is the focus on easements along the power lines and natural washes? It's not feasible to travel the power line access roads cut into a wash area. And, well, look, we spoke about the fact that at least 2 search groups have offered their services to the Pima County Sheriff's Office. One is Texas Equus, Midwest Equus, and the other was the Cajun Navy. And so far, as we have been told, the sheriff turned their services down. I don't know why, because Texas Equus, we have personal experience with. They're fantastic. And they regularly find the remains. They regularly find victims. They find them alive. And I don't know why Sheriff Nanos has turned this down. Mike.
Bill, I always go back to the politician thing. He's a politician now as much as he is a law enforcement officer. And I think if there's going to be a resolution to the case, if they're going to find or recover, Nancy, I think he wants to be the one to get credit, his department. He doesn't want anyone else to get credit. And he'll go right in front of a microphone again and have all the channels and all the news people all around him, because I think whatever announcements that there's going to be, he wants to make them. And I think that it's partly, pride that he doesn't want to see. No matter how good these guys are, they may have maybe much more experience than some people in the Pima County Sheriff's Office in these limited sorts of kind of, incidents. But I think it's pride right now. He wants to be in control and give all the information. He doesn't want to give credit to anybody else.
Yeah, that could be. At Rose Bresky 819, why did it take them a month to find a damaged utility box? At Rose Bresky 819, I don't know, but they've eliminated that. It's not part of the case. So possibly they could have determined early on, and they just didn't publicize it, that has nothing to do with this investigation. There is so much to do on these investigations, and they may not get back. They may not get back to the public or to the media as quickly as perhaps you would want them to. At KMTX 78, I still think somehow this is going to end up coming back to someone close in the family. I hate saying that, but it's been my thought since day one. At KMTX 78, I absolutely agree with you. I really think, and we've said a million times, that the victimology is the biggest thing in cases like this. And what does that mean for those who are tuning in, the brand new? The study of the victim, looking into the background of the victim's habits, the victim's family. Where does the victim go? What does the victim do? Who are the victim's friends? What cars does the victim own? Does the victim have money? What is the victim's financial situation? The answer to this case is somewhere in the victimology. And we've been saying that since day one. And I still believe that in KMTX, very astute of you. And I agree with you. Also from the chat, at Delft Punk, took 47 days before Koberger was announced as person of interest. With this case, we were at 41 days. At Delft Punk, don't compare. It could take much longer, But something with Koberger, he was sort of on their wanted screen early on in the investigation when they were looking for that white Hyundai Elantra, and they just didn't tell you. They identified it pretty quickly, and then they didn't wait to pull the trigger on him until they had the hit on the investigative genetic genealogy. It first identified his father, and then it came back to him. Mike.
Yeah, 47 days is really quick in this homicide investigation. But as this began, this case was thought of as a kidnapping and a ransom case, and usually those don't take long at all, because the person who does the kidnapping and asks for the ransom, demands the ransom, they want their money. They don't want to have an elderly person or a kid, whoever they kidnap. They don't want them in their care. The longer you hold on to somebody, the more dangerous it is for you. But in a homicide case, 47 days is nothing. So I think the issue for many people in the public was that they believed it was a kidnapping off the bat, and so they expected within several days to a week maybe that they'd all finish this. The FBI would know what happened. We'd have our motive. It would be really apparent, and within a week, maybe two at the most, we'd have somebody. But if this was a homicide investigation, they wouldn't be talking that way. But the public's expectations were set early on by messaging and perhaps maybe incorrectly, kind of seeming that this was believed to be a kidnapping, and it set people's expectations a certain way. I think in some ways that was a disservice to the public. Absolutely.
From the chat at Naturebound 1064, do police go through training as to how and what to say to media in these cases? At Naturebound, great question. And the point is that most police departments, the big ones like the NYPD, they'll have like the chief, the borough commander, or perhaps a detective squad commander or a detective boss will be the spokesperson. If it's a really huge case in New York City, the police commissioner does the presentation. Yes, they are trained what to say and what not to say. And some of the things you have to hold back, evidentiary things. that you don't want everyone to know because it could hurt the case. Letting too many, you could let something out there that initially is thought to be correct that is false. So one of the sentences they always say, as we give you this presentation, we want everyone to know that this information is preliminary and subject to change. That's like the sort of addendum, the disqualifier that they say at every press conference. In smaller departments, like for this one, they should have a PR person that is either coaching this sheriff or is doing the presentation, because the sheriff here is bad at messaging. He's horrible. And that has hurt this case tremendously. And don't just take it from me. This is a sergeant that works for the Pima County Sheriff's Office. I want to play a little bit of this because I don't want people to think we're unfairly bashing this Sheriff Nanos. So let me get this up on the screen.
It's me now. Aaron, good to see you.
Good to be with you, man.
You've been pretty critical of your own sheriff, including, this case as well. What's he getting wrong? What did he get wrong? What could he have done better?
Well, at this point, a lot of the questions being raised with my members are whether or not that we should hand this off to the FBI and move into a supportive role to assist them. The FBI has an incredible amount of resources, personnel, funding that they can draw from to try and find Nancy and hopefully bring her home safely to her family.
So you think from the very beginning, I mean, that weekend that they realized that she was gone, the FBI should have immediately jumped in and taken over?
I think once this moved from a search posture to a possible kidnapping, the FBI, they're the premier agency in the world to deal with kidnappings. And that's something that our medium-sized law enforcement agency probably just doesn't have the experience to handle. We have 96 detectives, and they're very hardworking detectives, and they've been putting in very long hours each week since she's been missing. But I think the FBI's expertise is something that we should take advantage of more.
So Sheriff Nanos has also been pretty critical of you, saying that you and others don't have a clue what this investigation has entailed. Your response to that?
That's true. We don't know what's being discussed inside the homicide unit that's running primary on this. They've kept a lot of discipline to keep information from getting out. They've been doing a very good job about that. But I think even the public has questions about things that they've been able to see. Us turning over the scene the next day, Sheriff Nanos himself at first admitted that they probably released the scene too early. These types of things undermine public trust. And that's not something that you want to do as a law enforcement agency in the middle of what is one of the highest profile cases we've ever had in this agency.
Quickly, do you think that she can come home alive?
We pray. This is unprecedented to my knowledge in American history, to bring someone home that's been missing this long, who's ostensibly held for ransom. So we're working hard, I can assure the public.
So that's Sergeant Cross. So he gave his true opinion on Sheriff Nanos and how this investigation is being run. You would never, ever, ever have a detective or a sergeant from the NYPD say, oh, we believe that this case should be turned over to the FBI. We would be like, first of all, we'd be guillotined by the board. But we would never say that because we have so much confidence in ourselves and our own abilities. We think that the FBI working with the NYPD, I'm just giving you my personal knowledge, that they're guests and they're going to watch us and they're going to be like, oh my God, these guys are unbelievable, which we've had other units from the NYPD. I remember there was a unit from 1PP, I won't say their name. They came and they were watching the Manhattan North Homicide team, my team, work, and they were like in awe. They were absolutely in awe, and they voiced that. They were like, oh my God, I can't believe watching you guys is amazing. Well, I said, thank you. So we take that pride in it. And in this case, look, this is not an easy case. It's a very difficult case. And I believe down the road, this case is going to be solved, but it's not solved quickly enough. And also, the press always gets crazy, if it's not solved in 2 weeks, At Cheryl1231, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Isn't the sheriff awful close to dereliction of duty? No, he's not derelict in his duty. He's just not good at his job. I'll put it that way. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, that component of his job, public relations, is wanting. I think he should have turned it over. We talked about this many times. I think he should have turned it over to someone who would be a spokesperson, who's a little bit more glib, who's a little bit more, experienced. And the one-on-one conversations, no, you cannot have those. And like we talked about motive earlier, you tell the press, we think we know what the motive is. Of course, you know what the follow-up question is going to be. And the moment, if you actually did say something about the motive, what motive you actually thought it was, you'd be giving away pretty much the entire case of who it's against, and you don't want to give someone who's actually not knowing that they are the subject of the investigation any forewarning of what a law enforcement agency is going to do. It's been the messaging right from the start. And at this point, you can't go back and change it. And unfortunately, he may have been a great detective at one point or a great law enforcement officer, and maybe he's a decent administrator, but when it comes to a communicator, he's not at all. He's not good at all.
No. At Walter C. Ryan 3720, this was a targeted crime. Walter, well, we happen to agree with you. Absolutely. What do they say? You're preaching to the choir. We believe the same thing. This is from a local Tucson station.
Today marks 40 days since the search for Nancy Guthrie began. And now we're learning more from the Pima County Sheriff's deputies about some of the evidence collected in this investigation. The Pima County Sheriff's Department says the Honda connected that was impounded will be returned to the family soon. The car belongs to Nancy's daughter, Annie Guthrie. And as we've reported, she was one of the last people to see her mom after dropping her off at her home after dinner on January 31st. Now, you'll remember Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos said weeks ago that Annie Guthrie, along with the rest of the Guthrie family, have been ruled out as suspects. Also this morning, investigators say they're still actively looking for more tips and leads.
So, Mike, I didn't like that either, that he said the whole Guthrie family has been cleared. First of all, how do you know that? Right. What if something happens and in the next couple of weeks they're back included? Why would you make that statement? I have a real problem with that. And this is where this sheriff is, as Matt Murphy, as I said, and Garagos, the famous attorney from the left coast, Matt Murphy said, this has been a clown show from day one. And I have tremendous respect for Matt Murphy. If you don't know who he is, was an Orange County prosecutor. I think he would never lost a case. He was a homicide investigator. And now he's a talking head. He's actually a contributor to ABC News. And he said on the Megyn Kelly show that this has been a clown show from the beginning. How would you like your department to be referred to as that? It's been a clown show. Who are we looking at? Who's the number one clown, Mike?
Yeah, Bill, it's disparaging. It's a disparaging comment, but and it's hurtful because there's many great, excellent men and women who are detectives and patrol officers in that department, and they know what they're doing. But unfortunately, for all of their professionalism, they got off on the wrong foot in this case, and sometimes you can't recover from that. And as right now is silly looking, sometimes we look at that video, it may be very creepy of that person walking over towards the Ring doorbell camera. Like, why would you cover it up with a couple of leaves and stuff? They may be dumb, but they're smart enough in some ways to have gotten away with this, thwarted people for 41 days. They may not get away with it completely. We don't think so. But there are times when the leader can say and do things that makes the whole department look bad. And the fact is, when they do that, it is disparaging to all the other men and women who are detectives and police officers in that department. And it's unfair, but sometimes that happens because we all look for shortcuts to say, what is this? What about this department? What about that person? But yeah, if you're talking about it as being a clown show, then you've done a number of things wrong. And the people who are professional in law enforcement are just pointing it out.
Absolutely. From the chat at M. Tolan, who can we call upon to get the FBI to take over because enough is enough? That won't ever happen.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. It's a protocol, and it's throughout this nation. And cases like this, the lead investigative agency is the police department that covers the residents of the victim in this case. If the FBI just came into every case and flexed their muscles and said, we're taking over this case, I'll give you a little piece of an example. Most of the NYPD doesn't care for the FBI, period. That's just, I'll let you in on a little secret. So could you imagine if they tried to come in and did that with a big department like the NYPD or Chicago or Miami or Detroit or Los Angeles? They wouldn't be able to get near a case. As it is, there's lots of times where there's not a lot of cooperation between the agencies. We saw that, where there was a tremendous amount of cooperation because they knew they needed the FBI, the Brian Koberger case, Moscow, Idaho. They welcomed the FBI, and I'm sure they took their counsel, took their advice. What should we do? What do you think? Blah, blah, blah. And as a result, 6 weeks after those horrific quadruple murders, you had a perpetrator in handcuffs and a perpetrator who pled guilty because the case against him was so strong. And I'm sure there's people listening. No, they had no case against Brian Koberger. Yeah, that's why he pled guilty to a quadruple murder. Mike.
Yeah, and doing life without possibility of parole. Yeah, the pro-burgers out there, there's always going to be that sort of person who takes that angle that law enforcement has no idea what they're doing. He was framed. Obviously, he was framed, or he had help. There may be some fraternity brothers or the Cali drug cartel. It just goes on and on. But it's sad what the public, some people in the public will run with and figure this is the way, the case is gone. And this, no. We're surmising based on our experience, what we believe is going on. And the FBI, when we've worked in the NYPD, there was that tension all the time because, we're like doing related law enforcement. We do it one way, they do it another. And it is, there's turf battles and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we're all carrying a shield. We're all carrying a firearm. We're all law enforcement. It doesn't matter if you're a part-time constable, a sheriff, an FBI special agent, or a lieutenant in the NYPD. We're all on the same boat, but we do like to fight with each other. Absolutely.
At Robert Jones, 08U, the sheriff is insecure and too busy justifying himself amid personal attacks. He's a political doormat and too far removed from actual police work and public speaking. At Robert Jones, how do you actually feel? That's pretty. It's pretty clear how you feel. Let's see in the chat. At HNY Wheels 8771, they told the family not to come out publicly at first, but I don't know why they haven't come out more often. Why didn't they help search? Well, at this point, it's pretty clear that they may have lost their mother, and that's not their job to search for the mother. It's the job of the police department and the professionals. I don't think the family wants to go out into the desert searching for them. Well, maybe they do, and they have the right to do that if they want to. Violet's 6863, if a local's responsible, she was buried in their backyard or in their septic tank. Will you ever know where she is? It's so awful for the family. Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping and we're praying that this will get solved down the road, and I believe it will. But right now, we are all impatient. I want to play this. This is also from a local news station.
Giving us an update on the search for Nancy Guthrie nearly 6 weeks since her disappearance, saying he believes the suspect could strike again. The sheriff says, though they believe Nancy was targeted, that they can't be 100% sure of that. I spoke one-on-one with Sheriff Chris Nanos, who says people should remain aware of their surroundings. For those in the community worried about their safety because the suspect has not been arrested, what is your message to them?
My message is to everybody, putting this case aside. If, I understand we live in a beautiful area and nice clean air and people like to have their windows open at night. I would tell you, because I'm just a cop, don't do that. Lock your windows, lock your doors. If you've got a security system, I've learned from this. I have a security system too. Make sure you've got that recording that's not just recording itself over and over and over again. A subscription, maybe a cloud server. I don't know, but I'm saying take a look at your security system.
Meanwhile, investigators say they are still looking for tips and leads. The Pima County Sheriff's Department says they've received hundreds of new tips in the Nancy Guthrie case since March 1st, so just this month. The Sheriff's Department remains and reports that thousands of tips have come in since she disappeared. The FBI says from February 1st to March 2nd, they've received more than 25,000 tips. And Sheriff Nanos previously said the department and FBI had over 30,000 calls just 2 weeks after Guthrie was reported missing.
Mike, I can't help but think that they're not close to making an arrest. There would be signs, I think, more signs than we're getting. We're just getting breadcrumbs every day of this and that. But we're not getting anything really strong that's leading you to think. And, when they're still hoping and praying that the DNA inside the house that was commingled, when they're still hoping that comes back, then that they don't have that much else. And that is a little bit disturbing, I think, that they don't have that much else, Mike.
About a week and a half ago, they had video from a drone of showing some federal agents and maybe federal prosecutors going around the house. And I thought that was a good sign that maybe as of looking at the case from a prosecutor's point of view, it's going to be a federal prosecution. They've got someone assigned to the case and that they're looking at what evidence that the police have gathered. And they're looking as from a prosecutor's point of view, what else do they need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, much higher level than probable cause. And so I was really happy with that. I thought, looking at it from that perspective of a prosecutor, that there was some risk. They were going in a certain direction, and they had a really good idea of who the perp was and what the motive was and that sort of thing. But now I'm not so sure because of, we haven't seen anything new. You've picked up on this and Phil's picked up on this. We would expect to see certain things happening and we haven't. It doesn't mean I don't think this case isn't going to be solved. I imagine it will be solved, but I don't think it'll be solved in the very near future. And I hate to say that, but I'm prepared for the worst rather than hoping for the best, as a police skeptic. But this is a long, slow slog right now through a lot of re-interviewing people, looking over all your digital information again, getting search warrants for people's laptops, people's phones, all of that stuff. And that takes you've done this, Phil's done it, takes an awful lot of time.
Absolutely. Simi Sharp, thank you. Tips, 1-800, call the FBI or fbi.gov/tips. Thank you to Simi Sharp, one of our moderators. Thank you for all you do for us. Question, Tiny Face McGee. Do you think they have figured out a vehicle? If not, why? I do not think they've figured out a vehicle. I think they have 12 vehicles of interest that was caught on that videotape 2.5 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. But it takes a lot of investigation now to figure out. Now you don't just have one car, you have 12 cars. Now they got to find out the potential owners. They got to go through license plate readers. They got to go through lawman searches. They got to see if they can ID the car and the owner of the car. Does the owner of the car have a criminal history? Who owns this car? What were they doing in that area? So all of those things, It's not like the easy button you see on your Law and Order on TV or Special Victims on TV that gets solved, 40 minutes and 20 minutes of commercials, they solve the case. It's not like that. Everything takes lots of time. Folks, if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, make lots of comments. If you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels, and we have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels, and we appreciate all of our off-the-cuffers that join the Police Off the Cuff family and support this channel, which, we were struggling. Well, it's always a struggle. Life is a struggle, as you know, but we were below 100,000 subscribers. We busted through that last month, and we're hoping that this is a banner year in 2026 for Police Off the Cuff. I have 2 great co-hosts, guests, if you want to call them that. You see right here, Professor Mike, and of course, straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi, 2 very knowledgeable guys, NYPD veterans. And I also want to remind everyone that the Police Off the Cuff podcast is sponsored by FanDuel on the Believe Network, and they've been a good sponsor for us. And I know sometimes people say, oh, why do you got to do that? Well, because believe it or not, producing this show costs lots of dinero, as they say, mucho dinero. And so they're one of our sponsors, and I appreciate that. FanDuel on the Believe Network. Mike, we went over actually an hour, and I want your final thoughts. And again, every day we're getting little bits of breadcrumbs on this case, not big pieces of it, and that's the nature of investigation. But your final thoughts.
Yeah, Bill, I don't want anybody to think that, the police, FBI is, facing a cold case situation. I can't stand that word. We've talked about this in other cases, but they have a lot of information they're going through, talk about all the tips. So ignore Sheriff Nanos and his messaging and rely on the ability of the FBI with all of their resources and their manpower and their experience. And they working with the homicide unit of the county police. They're going to solve this case. It's going to take longer than anybody wants, longer than you expect. And it may not end happily, but understand that this case will be solved.
100%. Richie Rich, and I don't know if in fact this is true. I don't know where you got this information. And Richie Rich 2713, they just reported that they got more thumbnail pictures from different video camera angles, and it catches a couple of suspects 2 to 3. I hope you're right. I hope that's so. Absolutely true, because that would help this investigation so much. But I don't know if in fact every day I see on different channels people claiming they got someone in custody, right? And it's all bullshit. I mean, when something really happens and they really get good information, we're all going to know it. That bell's going to go off. Ding, 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 ding. You used to hear that in the police department when a big job came over that was the real deal. You would hear those bells go off. And hopefully something like that will happen in this case. But until it does, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. It's sort of like a matinee. We're going to keep following this case, and hopefully we're going to report one day, hopefully very soon, that it's been solved. Thank you so much for tuning in. On behalf of myself, Bill Cannon, retired NYPD Sergeant, and retired NYPD Sergeant, and Professor Mike Geary, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great day, everyone, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.